They believed they could take everything. My family's farm, our legacy, our future, and wipe it all away with a few signatures and a fake HOA transaction. They thought I'd just fold. What they didn't know was this land has been mine longer than their neighborhood has even existed. And when I started digging through old records, I didn't just find proof that I owned it. I found something much, much bigger. Started like any other day. The sun rose over the fields, golden light brushing across the wheat as it danced in the morning breeze. This land wasn't just where I lived, it was where I belonged. My father worked these fields. So did his father. We'd been here since before there was even a town nearby, let alone some HOA with manicured lawns and nonsense rules. So when my phone rang that afternoon, I expected it to be mundane. A delivery update, maybe, or a neighbor needing help with something. Instead, it was my lawyer, Sam Grayson, and he didn't sound calm. "We've got a problem," he said. "The HOA claims they bought your land." I nearly laughed out loud. "What? That's impossible. They can't buy something they don't own." "That's what I thought," Sam replied. "But you need to come down to the county records office. You're not going to believe this." An hour later, I was standing in a cramped little room staring at a pile of official-looking documents. Sam spread them out, his face as grim as I'd ever seen it. He tapped a page near the top. "This is a sales agreement. It says you transferred 1,500 acres to the Oakwood Hills HOA 6 months ago." "That's a lie," I said instantly. "I never signed anything." He nodded and handed me a copy of the so-called authorization form. My signature was on it, except it wasn't. Not exactly. It was a forgery, and not even a very good one. I felt heat rising in my chest. "They faked it," I muttered. "It gets worse," Sam said. "They already flipped the land, sold it to a developer. Bulldozers are scheduled to break ground next month." I stared at the document, every muscle in my body tightening. My land, my family's legacy, all being handed off like some backroom deal. And the name on the approval? Daniel Whitmore, HOA president. And the notary? His wife, of course. Daniel was the kind of man who smiled while slipping a knife into your back. Over the years, he'd sent complaint after complaint. Dust from tractors, cows making too much noise. He even tried to cite me for not matching the neighborhood aesthetic. I always ignored him, figured he'd get bored eventually. But now he was trying to erase me completely. Sam lowered his voice. "We can take this to court. You've got the original deed. We can get the whole deal thrown out, but you need to be ready for a fight." "I want everything," I said. "Every document, every signature, every forged stamp." If they thought this would go unnoticed, they're about to learn just how wrong they are. Back home, I pulled out the old metal safe tucked behind my desk. Inside were the records my father left me. The deed, tax documents, exemption letters, all the proof we'd ever need. As I was going through them, something caught my eye. A barely legible note in the inheritance documents. A second land parcel transferred at the same time as the main farm. I didn't recognize the plot number. Curious, I pulled out an old county survey map. Took nearly an hour to piece it together, but when I did, I froze. That second parcel? It wasn't just extra farmland. It was 300 acres of untouched land that extended beyond what I'd always considered our boundary. And part of the Oakwood Hills neighborhood was built on it. I leaned back in my chair, stunned. Not only had they tried to steal from me, they were already trespassing on my land. Every house, every swing set, every white picket fence, built on ground they didn't even own. And that changed everything. The anger in me cooled into something sharper, strategy. I saw now this wasn't just about stopping the construction crew or reclaiming the stolen farm. This was a checkmate waiting to happen. I picked up the phone and called Sam. "Change of plans," I said. "We're not just fighting the fake sale. We're going to turn the table." He hesitated. "What do you mean?" I stared out over the golden fields. "I mean, we let them think they've already won. Let them break ground. Let them brag. Then we hit them with everything we've got. Ownership claims, trespassing charges, eviction orders, silence on the line." Then Sam exhaled. "This could work." "Oh, it will work," I said. "They picked a fight with the wrong man. They thought they were dealing with a farmer too stubborn to read fine print. But I've got history, truth, and the law on my side. And when the dust settles, I'll be the one standing, while they scramble to save everything they built on stolen land." They thought they'd won. They thought I was beaten, backed into a corner with nowhere left to run. But they didn't know I'd been digging deeper than they ever imagined. While they celebrated, I was neck deep in a mountain of old records, legal documents, faded maps. Every scrap of paper my father had kept hidden in the attic like dusty treasure. I wasn't just reviewing them. I was dissecting them, analyzing every inch like a detective cracking a decades-old mystery. And then it hit me, like a bolt of lightning. The truth lit everything up. The land wasn't just mine. It was more than I'd ever known. Turns out, my grandfather had purchased 500 acres for $1,000 over 60 years ago. But there was more. Nestled deep within the inheritance paperwork from when my father took over the farm was a long-forgotten clause. A hidden addition. Another 300 acres. Land that hadn't been touched in decades. That land? It sat directly beneath part of Oakwood Hills. The very neighborhood whose HOA board had been trying to force me off what they claimed was their land. Streets, sidewalks, luxury homes, even part of their pompous clubhouse, built right on my family's property. They never officially transferred ownership. No records, no filings, no legal documents. They just assumed it was handled when the expansion rolled out. Lazy legal work, or deliberate negligence. Either way, their mistake was about to destroy everything they thought they owned. I flew down the gravel road into town, dust swirling behind my truck as I barreled into Sam's office. He barely managed a hello before I dropped a stack of documents in front of him. "Read this," I said, my voice shaking with adrenaline. "This changes everything." Sam's eyes darted across the pages. His brow tightened. Then he reached over for a county zoning map, his finger tracing the borders. "If this holds up," he paused, double-checking the lines. "Frank, this puts your property line right through the northern half of Oakwood Hills." I nodded. "Exactly. They've been squatting on my land for years." He sat back, stunned. "You know what this means? These people, their homes, their mortgages, their insurance, it's all built on a lie. They're technically trespassing. And I can take it back," I said, that fire in my chest burning hotter than ever. Sam hesitated. "If you do this, Frank, you'll be tearing up a whole community. You're talking about families, kids." "They didn't think about my family," I snapped. "They tried to wipe out everything my grandfather built. Now it's their turn." He saw it in my eyes. There was no talking me down. "So what's the move?" he asked. "We wait," I said, leaning in. He blinked. "Wait. Let them think they've won. Let them keep going. Keep sending their violation letters. Let them throw their celebrations and break ground on construction. The deeper they go, the harder they'll fall." Sam started to grin. "You're planning to let them hang themselves." "Exactly," I replied. For weeks, I played the part humble, defeated, harmless. Just a farmer barely holding on. Meanwhile, the gears turned behind the scenes. I filed the proper claims with the county carefully and quietly. I laid the foundation for what would soon become the largest legal nightmare Oakwood Hills had ever seen. Then the final piece fell into place. A letter arrived in my mailbox, an official notice from the HOA. Bold, arrogant, and soaked in delusion. "Dear Mr. Franklin Johnson, the Oakwood Hills Homeowners Association has finalized the sale of Parcel 16A to Oakwood Hills Development LLC. Your land ownership claims have been reviewed and dismissed. Construction will begin October 1st. Any further resistance will result in legal action. Regards, Daniel Whitmore, HOA President." I read it twice. Then I laughed so hard I nearly dropped the envelope. They'd just signed their own death warrant. That night, I filed the final claim, an official ownership assertion citing the inheritance clause and all legal evidence of my rights to the land in question. The county opened an immediate review, and everything changed. Within days, the entire neighborhood was in chaos. Homeowners received notices stating their property deeds were in legal dispute. Banks froze mortgages. Insurance companies backed out. Real estate agents pulled listings. The community was paralyzed. And Daniel Whitmore? He was at the center of the storm. The next morning, I walked into the county courthouse. Homeowners flooded the halls, demanding answers. HOA members argued in hushed panic. And there was Daniel, pacing like a man on the edge of collapse. He spotted me, his face drained of color, rage barely holding back the panic. "What the hell did you do?" he spat, marching up to me. I stood tall, arms crossed. "I just reminded the county whose land this really is." "You won't get away with this," he snapped. "The HOA has power. We'll fight this in court." "Oh, I'm counting on it," I said, "because while you were busy playing emperor, I made sure the banks and insurers were alerted first. You know what happens when a deed gets flagged? Everything freezes. Your power's gone. Your empire just crumbled." He glared, jaw tight. "You tried to erase my family," I added. "But now, Daniel, your entire world is built on a foundation you never actually owned." And just like that, the king of Oakwood Hills finally understood what it felt like to lose everything. What happens when an entire neighborhood suddenly becomes worthless? I watched his confidence crumble in real time. "You wouldn't." "I already did." I walked away, leaving him standing there as the weight of everything he'd built began to collapse. But that wasn't the end, it was only the beginning. This wasn't just about reclaiming what was rightfully mine. I was taking back my land, their homes, and the very foundation they thought was untouchable. By the time it was over, there would be no HOA left to stand in my way. The next month, I quietly set the stage for the most satisfying takedown I had ever engineered. I stayed patient. I stayed quiet. I let them believe they'd won, because every minute they underestimated me was another step closer to their destruction. Daniel Whitmore and his pack of HOA loyalists strutted around like they were kings of the neighborhood, convinced they'd already buried me under paperwork and fines. In their minds, I was just a bitter farmer too old and stubborn to move on. What they didn't know was that every smirk, every threat, every ounce of their arrogance was gasoline on a fire I was about to ignite. The first move was to let them get cocky. I needed them to think I had no plan, no power left. I played the fool. I went to their meetings and made loud, desperate pleas. I yelled about injustice and demanded answers, knowing they'd ignore me, knowing it would only feed their ego. I acted like a man with nothing left to lose, while in the background, I was building a case they wouldn't see coming. I had already filed the land claim with the county, that was the easy part. But paperwork alone wouldn't win this war. I needed evidence. Solid, damning proof that the HOA had acted with full knowledge of their wrongdoing. That they had built homes on land that never legally belonged to them. I started digging literally and figuratively. My first stop was the county records office. I pulled every document ever filed under Oakwood Hills. Most of it was typical development fluff, but then I found it, buried in the minutes of an HOA meeting from 4 years ago. A casual mention of a zoning issue during the neighborhood's expansion. The board had noted a potential irregularity but dismissed it as a non-issue. That was it. They knew. They saw the red flag and chose to ignore it. That single decision, recorded and signed, was my opening. Then I went to the residents. Not all of them were fans of the HOA, and it didn't take long to find allies. Lisa Patterson was one of the first. She had been fined, harassed, and micromanaged since day one. Mailbox colors, door shades, lawn height. When I showed her what I'd uncovered, she turned pale. "You mean my house might not even be legally mine?" she asked, frozen in her kitchen. "It's not just you," I told her. "It's dozens of homes. And they knew it. That's all she needed." She handed over every letter, every violation, every bitter exchange she'd ever had with the HOA. And I knew she'd share it with her neighbors. I wanted the panic to spread. Next, I targeted the developer. The HOA had sold my land to a construction company that rushed through permits and skipped over essential surveys. Thanks to Sam's digging, I found out they had even secured loans based on projected values of homes that were built illegally. The financial liability was massive. If my claim held, those loans were in jeopardy, and the developer would be looking for someone to blame. That someone was the HOA. But while I prepared, they retaliated. Petty threats, false fines, flyers in mailboxes accusing me of trying to destroy the community. They painted me as a bitter ex-landowner trying to sabotage innocent families. The irony nearly made me laugh. Then I woke up one morning to find my fence destroyed. The entire border between my property and theirs had been ripped down. And at the edge of my field stood a brand new HOA sign claiming the area as a future development. I stood there, staring at it for a while. Then I took a picture and sent it to Sam. "This is it," I said. "They're about to bury themselves." Over the next few weeks, I gathered every shred of evidence. Photos, witness statements, video recordings. I even hired a private investigator to catch the board members talking too freely at their country club hangouts. I let them feel invincible just a little longer. And then I struck. The county issued formal notices to every homeowner in the disputed zone. Their property deeds were now under legal review. Within hours, the HOA's phone lines were flooded. People who thought they owned their homes were staring down legal chaos. Sales were frozen. Mortgages flagged. Panic spread. Homeowners turned on the HOA. Lawsuits started rolling in. The construction company flipped sides and accused the HOA of hiding critical information. News outlets got wind of the story. It started local, then spread like wildfire. Entire neighborhood built on disputed land. Dozens of families in limbo. Daniel Whitmore vanished. His board tried to cover themselves, claiming ignorance. But it was too late. Then I filed the lawsuit. It was no longer just about land. It was about every lie they told, every dollar they stole, and every person they misled. Sam had built an airtight case backed by verified ownership and mountains of evidence. The moment the suit was filed, every homeowner became entangled in the mess, and they had no clue it was coming. By midday, legal notices were hand-delivered to every home in Oakwood Hills. People opened their doors to find out they never legally owned the land their houses sat on. Mortgages, insurance, property values, everything fell into question. Transactions halted. Chaos erupted. The HOA office was mobbed by furious residents. Phone calls to lawyers, banks, and agents surged. No one could sell. No one could refinance. No one could escape. Because it all belonged to me. The lawyers came first. Then the politicians. Everyone wanted to weigh in because if Oakwood Crest collapsed, it meant every similar development could face the same reckoning. I didn't say a word. I let the HOA panic on their own. And panic they did. At the emergency meeting, the board tried to patch the cracks. Daniel Whitmore, who had been hiding for a week, finally showed up. Sweat drenched his shirt as he stepped to the podium, the fluorescent lights making his nervousness visible to everyone. The residents weren't just angry, they were furious. "You told us everything was legal," one man shouted. "Our deeds are worthless," a woman screamed, shaking her mortgage paperwork in the air. Daniel tried to steady them, raising his hands. "We're working with legal counsel to resolve these misunderstandings." "Misunderstandings," I said from the back. The room hushed instantly. Every head turned as I walked toward the front. Daniel's face drained of color when he saw me. I raised a thick folder. "This isn't a misunderstanding," I said, my voice calm and clear. "It's fraud. Illegal property transfers. Zoning manipulation. Deception so deep it's going to financially ruin this neighborhood." The silence lasted a heartbeat, and then chaos. People shouted, cried, demanded answers. Their dream homes had been built on stolen land. "You said we were protected," a man shouted at Daniel. Daniel had nothing left to say. He just stood there, hollow and silent. And then came the lawsuits, not just mine anymore. Homeowners who once saw me as a nuisance turned into plaintiffs, suing for misrepresentation, fraud, and damages. Banks froze funding. Insurance companies pulled out. The developer who bought the stolen land from the HOA filed a massive lawsuit of his own. $2 million for breach of contract and fraud. That was the final blow. With no reserves left and legal costs piling up, The HOA crumbled into bankruptcy. The same people who once fined me over a shed or grass height were now watching their empire collapse. Daniel resigned in disgrace before being sued personally. But I wasn't finished. Because now, with the land legally mine again, I had power. And I was going to use it. I didn't touch the homes. I sold the land beneath them, to the highest bidder. If people wanted to keep their homes, they'd have to buy the ground beneath their foundations from me. Some could. Most couldn't. Property values plummeted. No one wanted a house sitting on disputed land. Banks wouldn't touch it. Loans were denied. People begged. I didn't listen. House by house, foreclosure swept through the neighborhood. Investors bought land cheap. And the development formerly known as Oakwood Crest disintegrated. The HOA no longer existed, and I stood watching from my field as bulldozers rolled in. In court, the silence was suffocating. The judge glanced down at the thick stack of papers. Daniel sat slouched and sweating, hands clutched tight. Homeowners filled the benches, terrified of what came next. And then the gavel fell. The court ruled in my favor. Fraud confirmed. The sales nullified. My inheritance upheld. The land was mine. The homes? They were just trespassing structures now. People gasped. The HOA's attorney tried to object, but the judge shut him down. They had every opportunity to fix this and chose deceit instead. Daniel collapsed into his chair. The residents whispered, dazed. Their investments were gone. Their homes legally worthless. Outside, reporters swarmed, but I walked straight past them. That night, the eviction letters went out. 2 choices: buy the land from me or move out. Daniel was the first to crawl into my office. Please, Frank, he stammered. There has to be a solution. Oh, there is, I said. You could have not stolen from me. They didn't know, he pleaded. The homeowners. They didn't care when they were harassing me, when they fined me for dust or mailbox paint. They only care now because it's their homes on the line. He offered to step down. I laughed. There's no board to resign from. You're finished. The next morning, I started selling the land. Developers, investors, the same construction company they had conned, they all wanted in. The homeowners? They couldn't keep up. Foreclosures spread. Daniel lost his house. I watched him pack up his life and drive away. Defeated. The other board members fell next. Karen Monroe cried when she realized she was being evicted. James Porter disappeared, probably running from the lawsuits. Residents who once treated me like an outsider now begged me for deals. Please, Mr. Johnson, we didn't know. We have kids. Give us time. I stared at them the way they had looked at me all those years ago. Rules are rules, I said, and I meant it. Developers took over. They turned the land into what it was always meant to be: agriculture, open space, even a farmer's market. Gone were the beige homes, the trimmed hedges, the smug superiority. Gone was the HOA. Reporters painted me as cruel, vindictive. But the people who had watched what happened, who knew the truth, they understood. I didn't destroy Oakwood Crest. They did. I just finished what they started. And when the last rusted car carrying the last former board member rolled past the old entrance sign, now just 2 empty posts, I knew it was over. The empire they built on stolen land was gone. And I, the man they tried to erase, stood on my porch, drink in hand, breathing easy for the first time in years. No fines, no threats, no HOA, just my land, my legacy, back where it always belonged.